Delhi witnessed flooding like it has never in the last 4 decades after the Yamuna River breached the danger level. The low-lying areas were severely hit, giving rise to many questions. What led to the flooding in and around the capital city of India, and what can be done?
There are two types of problems. First one is the problem of the city not being able to push its water out into the river. The second problem is the river actually is the catchment. Its catchment is the entire Himalayas almost. So the water that comes in, falls into the Himalayas, have to find their way into the Yamuna, and it will flood. Okay? And now we know from the conditions of climate change that the situation will become more aggravated and more frequent. It can become more frequent. So there is no getting away from that problem of excess water coming into the river. But the other problem, the first type of flooding that we had in the city around 13th, 14th of July, was in fact the water that was unable to go out into the river system from the city because of inappropriate development. So these are two different type of things. To manage the river is one thing. To manage the flood waters in the city due to rain is one thing. All these entire what we call South Delhi's kind of better appointed environments, residential environments, were all given to this private developer to do the development. And when the private developer submits their plan for approval to DDA, what they check is whether the land use distribution within the residential areas are as per the master plan standards or not. That is, whether so many percentage of green is available, so many square meter area per person of open space and play areas are available. This kind of things that they check. They never check the lay of the land. They never check the land. Land is a primary resource for planning, and they don't check that resource. They don't see what is its potential for waterlogging, what is the profile of the land, and where will the water flow towards. So when that is ignored, and it has a tradition of being a paddy field, which is a waterlogged area anyway, where is the water going to go? It will stay there, because we have developed so much infrastructure all around, creating new roads and railway lines which prevent the water from flowing towards the river or even to the Nala system. So this is the reason why South Extension is flooding. But if you look at why Minto Road is flooding because of the close proximity of the railway station nearby. Same is the case in ITO. It's the same railway line which finally comes and crosses on Bhairav Marg in front of Pragati Maidan, where also the road has to go down because the railway line cannot go up. So road was taken down, and that place also floods. Similarly, if you look at Sarai Kale Khan on just next to the railway station, you can see that there are low-lying areas which are flooding because railway line is passing over it. Amsterdam is actually a very special case where the whole place is called Netherlands because it's below the water level. That's why it is called Netherlands, apart from Holland. Holland was the original name. It's called Netherlands because it's below the water level. And as a result, the water table is very high because the water will tend to come up from here. They have created huge embankments on the sides to prevent the water from flowing into the city. But those embankments also have a capacity. And in some times, I think about 20 years ago, it was breached. And all the streets in Amsterdam were looking like the streets in Delhi. They were all completely flooded and the water was flowing through them. They had an ingenious device of the windmills, which has now become like an iconic symbol of Holland, Those windmills were actually located in different parts of the different stretch of the entire city in order to use them to drive the water out back into the river. So it's a continuous process of pumping back. Just like what was done in all the basements in South Delhi last time when the water level had come up into the basements. Because the water table had gone up in the last year's rain, and all the houses created sumps inside the basement and pumped the water out through a pipe into the drainage system. Yeah? So, and therefore they were able to keep the place dry. That is not the kind of solution that we can afford as a nation. Yeah? Because if we have to do that, it's going to be massively expensive, both in terms of the environmental cost will be so high that will be, and we can't afford that environmental cost when we are signatory to the SDGs. Yeah? And we are saying that we bring down the climate indices further down. And all our developmental actions are actually running contrary to that. You cannot aggravate that contrariness further by sinking wells to take the water out. You look at the case of a place like ITO. ITO is actually was part of the riverbed at one time. Yeah? And the infrastructure, that is the ring road which was built across the city, was the first obstruction to prevent the water from going to the river. And then we have also developed the riverbed. We have the Delhi Secretariat, we have powerhouses, we have police stations, we have number of things happening there across the ring road on the riverbed side. So there is no way that water can escape to the river. You look at the massive flooding that's happening in northern parts of Chennai is due to the invasion of the wetland by development. Entire wetlands in the northern part of Chennai has been developed into industrial areas and housing and so on and so forth. And now all those areas go underwater when there is rain. If you look at Calcutta, for instance, the entire new town Calcutta is on the Calcutta wetlands. Entire metropolitan bypass is like a nose across the wetlands, because from the city the waters used to flow away into the Sundarbans towards the east. Now they have massive railway line which was built during the British period first, and then we have now the metropolitan bypass built right through the wetlands. And that whole area has got big hotels and hospitals and multi-story buildings. It's a picturesque, new, shining Calcutta's example. Yeah? But the whole thing is sitting on the wetlands. And that whole new town Calcutta it was called, was built on the wetlands without procuring proper EIA certification in time. In Bombay, the entire Bandra Kurla area was a wetland. It was full of, it was an estuary, where the Methi River used to come and open into the sea, and the sea was also able to come in and go back when it requires, and that was a swampy land. That area was developed into the most swanky business center in Bombay. The result is now entire water that comes through the Methi River, apart from various other reasons like garbage deposition and so on, the entire Methi River floods. So there is time and again examples of invading wetlands for development in this country. Yeah? And that, can we reverse that? It's impossible to reverse. So basically the solution has to be found within the problem or by understanding the problem. Without understanding the problem, we cannot find a solution. We cannot take solutions found elsewhere, say in Ahmedabad or in Bombay, and try to apply it here, because it's inappropriate for this context. So it has to be very contextually defined solutions that we look for, not an imported solution. The solution that was sought till now for the Minto Road was to pump out the water. There is a pumping station at the bottom there, and that water is pumped out. On even ITO also the water is pumped out. There is no other solution than pumping the water out. Well, there is one possibility, that is you can sink the water into the aquifer. Yeah? You cannot sink the water into the soil, immediate soil, because the water table is high in those places. The groundwater table is very high. If you dig 1 meter, 1.5 meters, you will find water, even in Pragati Maidan area, or if you go to the Central Vista area, 1.5 meters you have water. So there is no way you can put the water back into the soil. You have to dig much deeper, go right up to the aquifer, because there is a whole subsoil water system, the aquifer. The water has to be pumped back into that aquifer after very good filtration. Otherwise you will put your dirty water into the aquifer, which will then finally resurface in our wells. Yeah? So the other solution is to either to pump it out mechanically, or go deeper into the aquifer and put the water back into the aquifer through a filtering system. So the filter and the water drainage should be one thing, should be one part of one thing, and the whole thing should go down through the filter into the aquifer. That's one solution, and that is perhaps the only solution that you will find for most of the areas which are getting inundated in South Delhi now. Not only in South Delhi, perhaps also in North Delhi. Most places where water is unable to go to the river or to the Nala system because of the kind of infrastructure development we have done without thinking about the slopes. You look at the ring road, for instance, is the primary blockage of water from going into the Yamuna river, because where the ring road is now running was once upon a time a part of the river bed. It was part of the river to begin with, because both Purana Kila and Firoz Shah Kotla and even Red Fort are actually built along the water, because water was the main source of communication at that time. There was no road network. People would take, for instance, the king wants to go to Agra, he will take a boat and go to Agra, not go through what is now become the Mathura road. So it was always the water that was the source, and so they were in close proximity to water. Now the river has moved away further toward the east, and we have captured that part of the riverbed. Time is now gone for short-term solutions. We need to do some radical rethinking about development and look at the possibilities of realigning our idea of development to accommodate water, not work against water.